Joseph McVay will be electric. Glenn Seabrooks will be dominant for the Vanderbilt Commodores in 2025.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, well, we look at Vandy baseball. They moved their two game set up with Air Force game later on today at 1:00. They won game one in a tired. I would classify it as a tired game. And I was kind of expecting that after a long trip out west and a long trip home. So Vandy baseball getting it done, though. Is the basketball team still alive for an NCAA tourney spot? A win versus Kentucky at Kentucky on Wednesday would be nice. Also, special shout out to Makayla Blakes as she broke the scoring record, this time with the double nickel, 55 at Auburn. So shout out to her and the Vandy women's team. However, as Vandy football looks to take the next step, Clark Lee is looking for a lot of players to break out. And two of those guys that I think will really break out is Joseph McVay. He's going to be electric in that wide receiver core. We talked about the wide receiver core as a group on the last episode. And then Glenn Seabrooks will be dominant along that defensive line. I'm really, really excited about that. But let's start with Joseph McVay, okay? Joseph McVay is the vertical threat that Vandy needs in order to stretch defenses vertically and force them to defend the whole field. This kind of plays right into their philosophy. The thing that the pillar of the Tim Beck offense that I predicted coming into this past season, and the exact offense that we saw. Against Missouri, he got things started with a deep shot. We never really heard from him after that. Not sure what happened, but he showed his big play ability right then and there. I mean, just blew right past every line of defense and caught a big 65-yard bomb from Diego Pavia. And I thought up to that point, Missouri had a really good game plan. Like most people, we're going to come down on the run. We're going to stop the option. We're going to hit the option right in the teeth. We're going to slow play it and force Diego Pavia to try to make a move, or we're going to take his head off, right? That's the defensive game plan against Vandy. Well, Vandy decided, hey, we're going to use that to our advantage. We're going to get our fast guy right here with Joseph McVay. We're going to put him over the top. And lo and behold, 7-0, start the gates. Missouri's on their heels. That game was a very small handful of plays away from being a Vandy victory, especially in overtime, if they deflect that pass to Luther Burden in the end zone instead of him catching it to tie it back up in the first overtime. I think if they have to drive the field, they don't make it. But they took the shot on the first play and hit it, and they got all the momentum and won the game. So I think Joseph McVay is the reason why this offense is going to be really, really good. I think not anyone's talking about his chances of taking one of those outside receiver spots. I think Joseph McVay is going to be responsible for putting Junior Sherrill into the slot where Junior Sherrill needs to be, right? And that's no knock on Junior Sherrill's abilities as an outside receiver. But I think with Joseph McVay on one side on the outside, and then you have to pair him up with another outside receiver that's a bigger physical guy, like maybe Trent Hudson or Chance Fitzgerald, a couple of the new guys, or maybe LeBron Hill, who's a big target coming in as a freshman if he can learn quickly in June. I think your two outside guys coming out of spring, it's a really good chance that McVay is going to be on the off-the-ball outside guy, and Chance Fitzgerald is going to be the leader in the clubhouse as the on-the-ball guy. And so that's going to put Junior Sherrill with the ability of running jet sweeps and being kind of like a pitch guy and just kind of doing more of what he likes to do from the slot and what he's really good at from the slot. And people will take that as a slight, but it's really no slight to be called a slot receiver. I love Junior Sherrill in the slot, moving him around, creating mismatches, and getting him up the seam and getting him to attack the center of the defense. And if they want to play too high and try to contain all the run with everybody else, he can split those safeties and be just as electric and dangerous as Joseph McVay. But I think Joseph McVay is a breakout player to watch here for this offense. And so that, I think, plays into their scheme. I think that gives them a schematic advantage as far as stretching the field vertically. They didn't have that guy last year. McVay just wasn't consistent enough as a freshman. He was very raw coming in from high school. But I think a year of seasoning with off-season program to get bigger, stronger, faster, spring practice to get more comfortable, summer program, and then another fall camp. I think sky's the limit for that guy. And he'll benefit from opportunity as well. I mean, there's the depth chart is wide open. I think for him being in spring, I think he has a leg up. I think he's in a better position than Tristan Brown is right now. I think Jeremiah Dillon is just kind of on the outside looking in. He's kind of a wild card, but he's an older guy. And if he didn't take it last year, I just don't think he ever will. And that's, again, maybe the opportunity. One or two guys is going to get cut because of the roster trimming that's going to have to happen to get to 105. So there's going to be opportunity there. And then the shot plays that are designed for him because of the strong run game, the attention given to Stowers and Sherrill. Like if you can move Sherrill to the slot and you have him and Stowers patrolling kind of the inside and center of the defense, that's going to garner a lot of attention, which is going to leave McVay with some favorable matchups. And he's going to benefit from that opportunity because his skill set is really good. He's super talented. And if he just learns the fundamentals and the concepts behind how to run different routes, he's gonna flourish. And again, I reiterate, this will allow Sherrill to move into the slot. So if he can show that he's the guy, Tim Beck will move Sherrill to the slot in a heartbeat because that's where he belongs. He belongs in the slot. He is at home in the slot. McVay is a great outside guy, a great off the ball outside wide receiver, like a true Z receiver, right? I think that's where McVay fits the best because you can move McVay around. You can motion him and pair him up with the other outside guy. You can do some shifts and you can do some things there where you can even give McVay a jet sweep here and there if you need to, if you wanted to get like 12 personnel out there and take Sherrill out of the game and leave McVay, or depending, like you have all kind of possibilities with personnel packages, you're not just limited. And I think part of Vandy's problem, especially down the stretch, is they were just limited because they just didn't have guys that they trusted. I mean, Fungi was just somebody who kind of underwhelmed. Jeremiah Dillon never really got going. Quincy Skinner got banged up, and he was inconsistent catching the ball. Junior Sherrill was even a little bit inconsistent, probably the most consistent receiver we had that was considered a wide receiver. Like Eli Stowers was probably the only one, the only go-to guy that Vandy had. And teams knew that, and LSU knew that, and South Carolina knew that, and Tennessee knew that, and they took all that away. So, but anyway, I'm really excited about Joseph McVay. To expand on the wide receiver discussion as a group, I think he's going to emerge out of the group. I alluded to that fact yet on the last episode. I'm saying it now. He's the vertical threat that Vandy needs in order to stretch defenses vertically. All right, and then when you flip over the defensive side of the ball, you got a unit for Clark Lee that returns 9 starters. I mean, how could you not be excited about that fact alone, right? So you return 9 starters off a defense that was pretty productive. So, like, who's the breakout star? Like Keanu Coate, do we consider him a breakout? Like, he's a talented guy and he got some time with Alabama. Like, do we consider? I don't know. I don't know if you consider him that. I don't know if he qualifies as that because he's a new transfer. I'm considering somebody that was on the roster last year that had limited opportunity, but showed flashes of what they could be in those limited opportunities. And because of some things that are happening, we'll get better quality opportunities. And I think that guy is Glenn Seabrooks, because you can't call Brandon Fontenette a breakout candidate because he's already broken out. Same with Longwell, same with Patterson, same with Martell Height, guys out there that have kind of proven it. Now, maybe one of these corners will emerge. I just don't know which one yet. I'm not ready to anoint a corner as the top breakout player on this defense. But what I will do is talk about Glenn Seabrooks, because I thought he had a really nice season on the defensive line. He was a rotational guy. He was freshman All-American. I'll look that up here in just a second. But he's coming back to a defense that returns 9 starters. He's going to be in a defensive line rotation that I think is going to be hell on wheels for teams, because they've got more bodies. I think they've got higher quality guys. I think the training program, now that it's kind of hit full circle, I think they know what the goals are as far as what they want. Like, I think coming in, Coach Steiner didn't really know exactly what the goals were for each position group. I mean, they were probably on paper, but I don't think he truly understood really what Clark Lee wanted out of each of these positions. Now I think he does. And with training evolving the way it's evolving, I think things are all getting to a point where they're a lot more position specific. Like, you're not going to train a defensive lineman the same way you train a corner, and you're not going to train a wide receiver the same way you train an offensive lineman. Like, it's the same as different, right? It's different treatment, different. And a lot of it comes with strength exercises that go beyond just the base lifts. A lot of the differentiation in training comes with agility drills, conditioning drills, things like that, things that you would ask a defensive lineman to do that you would, like, you're not going to do long distance endurance with a defensive lineman, but you will with a corner, because corners are going to cover a lot more space. So that being said, I think Glenn Seabrooks is poised for a big breakout, because it's going to be a deeper defensive line group. He was already good from that interior, and the importance of having a really good, quick, fast interior defensive lineman that can push the pocket from the inside, that can clog up either A gaps. He can move and slant if you need him. He can twist. He's athletic enough to do that. He's a 2-sport athlete coming out of Davidson Academy. Huge, low center of gravity, great hands, violent. I mean, just has all the skills that you need, and an extra year of seasoning to showcase those skills. So I'm a big fan of what Glenn Seabrooks can do. I think there's going to be big things, literally and figuratively, from him in that defensive line position. And I think he's going to make a massive impact for this defense. I really love these two guys, especially to break out. I think these two guys really kind of stand out to me as upcoming sophomores for the Vanderbilt Commodores. So but we're going to switch it over to hoops, man. The Hoops has got some really good things going on. They've got some work to do, but they've got some exciting stuff going on. We'll talk about all of that next. But first, it's TurboTax. That's right. Yeah, this message is from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back or have to pay. Now taxes is simply as easy as uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed, all while you go about your day. No stressing, no worrying, no waiting. There's probably a little bit of that, but with this program, you don't have to worry about there's not a lot of stress there. Now, this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. It's only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen. If you need a second listen, right, if this episode ends and you want to click to something else, Locked On SEC is a phenomenal place to go. Locked On Ole Miss with Stephen Willis, the most watched and listened to Ole Miss podcast in the history of Ole Miss podcasts. Phenomenal there. You can't go wrong listening to that. And anybody in the SEC network, just go to this schedule. John Miller of Locked On Mizzou, he does a really, really good show. If you follow him on social media, or if you just want to go behind enemy lines one time, I think that's going to be worth your while. So check those shows out at your leisure after this episode concludes. But talking about hoops, and I want to start with a massive shout out. And I want to show some love for the women's team, and a big shout out to Makayla Blakes for breaking the record for scoring 55 versus Auburn at Auburn. Man, the Vandy women's team is going to be extremely dangerous in the tournament. She is an absolute machine when it comes to scoring. I really like the way she plays. Just takes over games, just gritty, just kind of plays to what's that Vanderbilt identity right now. Like tough and gritty and all that is the Vanderbilt identity. And I love watching them play. I love the women's team is really good at this. The men's team plays really well. I wish they'd do it in the second half. The football team, they just kind of ran out of gas towards the end of the season, but they played that, they're not going to be a tough out. They're going to fight you. You're going to leave that game black and blue. Right. And so she just exemplifies that. She's just a freshman. And I don't know the rules in women's basketball or I don't know the NIL situation with the women's team and the women's basketball in general, if it's worth it, if they're even allowed to go to the WNBA after a freshman season. I don't know the deal with any of that. I hope Makayla Blakes comes back and plays at Vandy, but certainly can't blame her if she decides to go. So big shout out to you, Makayla. It's a great thing to do. And she scored over 50 twice in the last 3 weeks. That's insane. Just on a scoring run. So speaking of the tournament, the men's team is still in the hunt, still have a great chance. They need 2 or 3 more wins in their last 6 and a couple wins in the SEC tournament, and I think they're in. Right now they're projected, I think, as a 10 seed. I think they can finish anywhere between a 10 and anywhere between a 10 and a 12 seed, depending on what they do on the stretch run. It's going to be a tough lineup of games until the last 2. At Kentucky, home against Ole Miss, at A&M, home against Missouri, and then home against Arkansas at Georgia. So I think your 2 most winnable games in the last 6 are Arkansas and Georgia, especially because you get Arkansas at home. It's a well-coached team, John Calipari, but you get them at home in the second slot on March 4th. But this game coming up on Wednesday at Kentucky. Now that's an interesting game. Now it's not at home. It's a road game. You're playing in front of probably one of the best crowds in all of college hoops and one of the best venues in all of college hoops in Rupp Arena. So a lot of tradition there. So it's going to be a challenge. And Mark Byington even alluded to this fact. And I don't know if he should have, because maybe, or if he did, maybe the team wasn't listening to him or they didn't hear that soundbite because they might get freaked out. But they match up well with Kentucky. What Kentucky does well and what Vandy does well, it just matches up really well because Vandy's able to take Kentucky out of what they do well defensively, and they were able to do it in the last game, and it felt like they were in control of that game, even though it was tight. It felt like they were in control of that game for most of it, and so I think if Vandy can just keep that up over 2 halves, we got to solve that problem. I don't know what's going on there, but we'll talk more about that on the next episode as we look at this matchup. But it's something that sure would be nice if they could take that game down. But I think that's going to be a tough one to do on the road. But they need that signature win, and honestly, I think if they get that signature win at Rupp Arena, now maybe that punches their ticket. Like you get 3 tier 1 wins, or quad 1 wins, I should say. That probably punches their ticket. That probably guarantees them a slot, whether it's a 10 seed, 11 seed, 12 seed, that remains to be seen. But I think if they get that and 1 more, they're probably in. Or let's say if they get one of these ranked wins, like let's say they beat Ole Miss at home, I think that gives them a good chance. Especially if they go on the road and beat A&M, like A&M's a top 10 team, if they can go on the road and get their signature win there, I think sky's the limit there too. There's a lot of things happening with this Vanderbilt team that there's a lot of possibilities. And that's a good feeling because last year at this time, we were looking at potential replacements for Jerry Stackhouse. And that wasn't a good place to be. And that, at this point, you were just hoping that they would show up and not get flat out embarrassed. And there was a couple, 9 times last year they won somehow. And most of the other times when they lost, it was over by halftime. Like when I say over, it's like they're pulling people out of the stands to play type over. So this team has done a complete 180. They just met in June. So I'm very ecstatic about that. But in order for them to make the tournament, which I think is a good possibility, they've got to win 2 more games, and then they've got to do something in the tournament. They can't get bounced in their first game in the tournament. I think if they get bounced, they could be on the bubble, last 4 out, and one of the top seeds in NIT, which I think any postseason tournament would be amazing considering what they went through. But I think being this close to the NCAA tournament, I just think, I find it difficult to really accept NIT as a success. I mean, I know it is a success because of the turnaround that happened. I'm not saying that I wouldn't appreciate what they've done this season, but like it just feels like just a tough way to it's just like kind of seems like a letdown a little bit. Honestly, like you're right there on the cusp of an NCAA tournament berth in year 1 of Mark Byington. This team is more than capable enough to go out and finish it. They should have finished it against Tennessee, but they've got to conquer that last hurdle. They got to get that signature win. They've got to figure out a way to play in the second half of games, and I'll break that down more on the next episode because I think it's like a psychology thing. It's almost like a psychology experiment. Like what are they going to do? Like how are they going to roll? How are they going to maneuver these second half collapses? And what can they do to fix that? So all that'll kind of determine their fate in postseason, things like that. But I think they've got to make a showing. I don't think they have to make a run through the entire tournament of the SEC, but I do think they have to make a showing. Maybe win 1 or 2 games, make a run, make it competitive, be a tough out. And I think the tournament committee will find a place to put them as a 13 seed, 12 seed. I don't care about the seed. You put Vandy as a 16 seed for all I care. But I just think you got to get them in the dance. And they've got to prove that they belong in the dance too. I'm not saying give them a charity bid, but like they got to get there. It's just that would be too good of a story for Vanderbilt. I think that would make things easier to recruit. Like, hey, we did this in year 1. We barely knew each other, and we're in the NCAA tournament now. So, go figure. You come here, we might win the whole dang thing. So, but Indiana, if you're listening, Mark Byington sucks. All right, Michigan, Virginia, if you're listening, you don't want to hire Mark Byington. He's terrible. He's awful. Yeah, you don't want to hire him. You just need to let him sit at Vanderbilt. Okay, that message is for Virginia, Michigan, Indiana, anybody that comes calling for Mark Byington. It's all the players. You don't want Mark Byington. You don't want him. You don't want him. But anyway, baseball. It's interesting what baseball's doing. I really like this turnaround. I really like the direction they're heading. I'll tell you why next. All right, wrapping up the show here. Locked On Vandy. Follow us on social media at Locked On Vandy on all social media platforms. It's really a good follow. And as I get more active on social media, maybe you should interact. Tell a friend, hit that subscription, hit that subscribe notification. Make sure it'll alert you anytime new content pops up on Locked On Vandy. Anytime I go live on a postcast or whatever the case may be, that's going to be a good run. So, talking about baseball now. Here's an interesting situation for what baseball has done. All right, the Vandy boys, Tim Corbin. All right, they just played a tournament out west in Phoenix, 3-game tournament. Not really a tournament, just kind of like Invitational, the MLB Desert Invitational. They just played 3 games. It wasn't really a tournament, but it was really just kind of like a preseason showcase. And they were on MLB Network, and it was a good little deal they did. Right, they played Grand Canyon, who could very well be a tournament team. They played Nebraska, who could very well make a run in the Big Ten, and they played UC Irvine, who I think was in Omaha a year ago. If not, they were a major factor in postseason play a season ago. So it's interesting. They went 2-1 in that whole thing, lost to Nebraska, and it was really one of those things where your starter is a little bit rusty, gave up a little too many runs, and Nebraska grabbed a hold of momentum and didn't let it go. That was that type of situation. Like, I think if your starter had gone a little bit better and a little bit longer into the game, Vandy probably ends up winning that game. Also, Vandy was hitting the ball really hard, but you know how the old adage goes in baseball: the harder you hit it, the more it goes straight at somebody instead of hitting things into the gap and getting base hits and extra base hits and all that stuff. They were hitting it right into outs, which is just a tough luck scenario. And so you look at their plate approach. I mean, they're driving the baseball, whether it's going at somebody or not. In all 3 games, they drove the baseball. And I talked about that on the last episode a little bit, so I'm not going to expound upon it as much. But the point of all that is to say that they had a 2-game midweek set with Air Force. And because of the snow that's coming into Nashville, we don't know exactly the extent of this winter storm. They moved the games up. So Vandy's going to end up playing 5 games in 5 days, 3 of them in the Western time zone. They fly back. I mean, they can't have gotten too much rest in between Sunday's game and the game earlier. They couldn't have got too much rest. And they played Air Force, and they played extremely well for the circumstances. I thought it was going to come out. I thought they were going to lay an egg, truthfully. And no one would have blamed them. They threw a freshman out there, Nye. I wish his name was William or Bill, and he was majoring in science. But they threw Nye out there, and he responded. He had a really good outing. He went 3 innings. They kind of went Johnny Holstaff after that, and I thought everybody that came in pitched, exceptionally well, and they just kind of held Air Force at bay. And the way I describe this game is tired. Like, it was just a tired game. They won 3-1. They had 7 hits, 3 runs, no errors actually. And they again, it was really impressive. Colin Fennell, he had a really nice outing. Austin Nye, it just disappoints me that his name's not Bill. But he threw 3 scoreless, 1 hit, gave up 1 hit, had 5 strikeouts in his first collegiate start as a freshman. So that's nice. Colin Barzy was really great behind the plate and really good at the plate. He drove in some runs. JD Rogers just hit one into orbit. I think knocked a construction worker off a platform. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't really do that, but he did hit it really, really far. Colin Barzy drove in some runs on a triple. Like, he drove one into the gap. Like, I want to reiterate the fact that, hey, these freshmen are playing a lot better. So I think the approach on the mound, I think the way that these freshmen are coming in and just contributing, I think some of these new transfer guys coming in, like, I just really like the approach of this team. It just seems like they're a lot more focused. They're a lot more concentrated. And last year's Vandy team would have lost this game probably 6-1 and would have looked not competitive at all. Like, I think last year's team would have done that. And honestly, with what they had to go through, I don't think anybody would have blamed them. And I'm still watching this clip of RJ Austin just mowing the runner down from left field. But I don't think anybody would have blamed them if they would have lost this game. But the fact that they didn't, and the fact that they were able to focus and get the win in those circumstances is pretty impressive, right? It's pretty impressive that they were able to finish that off. And it's pretty impressive that they're able to have the wherewithal to get the win, to keep Air Force really until the last inning off the board. And they just, they got into some jams and they got right back out of them. Strikeouts, double plays, mowing people down at the plate from left field. And that kind of thing was impressive with this team. And I think this team is different. This team is different from Tim Corbin all the way down. And they just take a new approach. And it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's the Diego Pavia effect, but I'm going to say it's the Diego Pavia effect. Like, everybody's playing with that mindset now, that tough, gritty, just gutted out mindset. Like, Vandy could have easily came in here lackadaisical. Easily. And they didn't. They gutted it out. They got themselves into some bad situations, gutted those out. They were struggling at the plate at times, and it had to be because they were exhausted, right? And you saw some moments where it's like, okay, they usually drive this pitch, but they just had nothing in the tank. And they'll get some much needed rest after this next 1 o'clock game. But it'll be it's good. It's good for their morale. It's good for when adversity strikes, they can handle it a lot better. So anyway, well, that's all I got. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys. But, lots of, feedback, all that stuff. Let me know how we're doing. And we'll see you back here next time. Locked on Vandy. Anchor down. Peace.